Hello, this is Steven Al, and we're here with the Green Hornet 66 episode review. So without any further ado, let's hop straight into the review. We begin this episode with a robbery in progress, and as the burglar makes his escape from a jewelry high, he ends up tripping the alarm. The police dispatcher ends up calling a local cop unit to investigate. However, another cop car, who was not called in, decided to go instead. Also, the Green Hornet is around too, listening on the police radio and are going in too. He too's been listening for possible burglaries. These two cops that were not supposed to be there are Bert and Dixon. They arrive there and start robbing the jewelry. So automatically, I like what is happening here. These are cops who are essentially using these burglary calls to quickly go and rob loot. That's all, that they failed to miss, and that way the blame for the whole thing being stolen is actually put on the actual burglar in question. Also, we established the dynamic with the cop. Bird is clearly an old-timer who's greedy and is greedy and is abusing his authority. Well, Dixon is not so much. He's clearly doesn't want to be a part of it, and Bird is kind of, bullying him into doing so. As soon as they get enough, they end up, leaving. However, Dixon, and with one of his, buttons on his shirt, ends up falling off and is left at the scene. The two quickly drive off and get out of there. Just as the Green Hornet happens to roll up, but he doesn't see the cop car, he comes very much later. The Green Hornet and Kato end up quickly searching the facility, only for the Green Hornet to eventually notice the missing button and picks it up. On their way out, he is cornered by the cops. The legitimate, honest cops, and ends up shooting, only to end up with the Green Hornet wounded and gets in a car and drives off. The police then report that the Green Hornet has been shot, and then had a dispatch call to all the hospitals to not treat, to hold any detainees, those who have a bullet wound in their shoulder, as that could possibly be the Green Hornet. Seeing that they can't go to the hospital because anyone there might be suspected of being the Green Hornet, they have no choice but to go home. I just love so far. This premise is so far interesting already, and I'm already intrigued. The villains are pretty much bent cops, and the Green Hornet is shot and wounded. He can't go to a hospital, and he has to go home, home, and automatically, it's really great. We also then see Bert and Dixon come back to the crime scene to discuss with cops with what happened, clearly trying to, get on top of it. But Dixon is told that the Green Hornet was here, and the robbery of these burglary calls are actually being pinned on the Green Hornet. And he's happy about it. The Green Hornet's taking the rap, they're free in the clear. However, Dixon, says this is bad, this is going to catch up with them. But Bert says, well, pretty much, that you're not getting out of this. You understand? You're in. So I kind of love that dynamic that's being developed. We go back to Britt Reed's place, where Kato is pretty much trying to do surgery to get the bullet out, but it's impossible and they're struggling to do so. Basically, Kato said he needs that Britt needs a doctor, but apparently he just basically goes, Kato, right now, you're the doctor right now. Kato then gets a call, which happens to be Frank Scanlon, who is, of course, inquiring about what happened. And Scanlon agrees with Britt, he can't go to a hospital, so he decides to come with painkillers. Just as he comes to the place with painkillers, it should be noted that it's revealed that the reason why they were on this case is because Frank Scanlon wrote them in, and now he feels guilty about what's happened because Britt Reed's now, injured. But, they do show the button that they found, and he realized it is police. It was his worst fear. But Britt Reed tries to reassure him there's only one or two bad cops. Highly unlikely that every cop is. But Frank Scanlon agrees he'll use this to, find out who these two possible cops were. But they have a bigger problem. How are they going to get the bullet out? They can't take him to a hospital, and even if they could come up with a plausible reason why he was shot, he would still be under suspicion. This gives Britt Reed an idea if the accident was to happen in front of a lot of people. He then takes some painkillers, not to be knocked out, but enough to be woken up in the morning. He then goes to the usual Daily Sentinel, and there he meets Frank Scanlon, who is happy how the Green Hornet, is being blamed for the robberies. And he says they should, just keep the momentum going. However, Britt Reed says that's not enough evidence. The usual banter between Britt and Mike Axford. Only for suddenly, Kato, dressed up in his vigilante, Kato disguise, ironic, ends up coming in and basically says how the Green Hornet has a message for Britt Reed. Britt Reed comes out and basically Kato shoots Britt Reed and runs off. Of course, didn't actually shoot him. It was a blank. Clearly made to look like that the Green Hornet was shot, basically tried to assassinate Britt Reed. And this will be enough to get him to hospital and get the bullet out, which works. He is taken to hospital and the bullet's out. Mike Axford is furious about all this, as for him, this is, this has gone too far, trying to assassinate Britt Reed in broad daylight, knowing the police aren't going to do nothing. Well, he says he's going to try and finally get the Green Hornet once and for all, and he walks out of the building. We then see that, Britt Reed is recovering well. The bullet's been taken out of his shoulder. He's in his arm's in a slingshot. And the doctor basically says, don't move it, as it would unsew the stitches and he could bleed to death. Clearly, for added tension, that something will happen later on in the episode. Just as Casey comes in with the newspaper, Britt Reed is shocked to read on the front page as it's advertising valuable furs. He says, why the hell is this doing on page 1? It should be on the back pages. And she says, it was Mike Axford's idea. And, she can't talk him out of it, and he has some plan. Britt Reed manages to figure out what the plan is. He says they'll do the rest of the work in the morning. He then gets to the nearest phone and ends up, calling Frank Scanlon. Frank Scanlon says, how are you doing? He says, possible. Do you got any lead on the missing button? He says, sure, and reveals the two cops' name. Burt and Dixon. And Britt Reed says, great, and he's pretty much about to go. Frank says, what do you mean? Go where? And he explains that Mike Axford has set a little trap for what he thinks is the Green Hornet. But he doesn't know it's a bunch of two crooked cops, who are actually really doing these, these burglary call robberies and wouldn't hesitate to kill him to protect their little thriving racket. And he says, well, can't you just stop him? He says, I can't find him. Not while I'm at this hospital bed. Against all orders, he leaves the hospital bed. This is what I like about the Green Hornet. He's human, but he's not like fully resourceful like Batman. He has a very small resources, really. The only thing he really has is a few gadgets and a car and very few allies, and he operates differently. So I kind of like that right now. He and Kato get in the Black Beauty, end up driving around until they find Dixon and Burt's police car. They end up getting their attention, and Burt and Dixon then end up following. Burt does, but he doesn't call him for backup because he wants the glory of taking them in because it means more money. And just as they think they corner the Black Beauty and ask them to come out with their hands up, Kato comes out of nowhere and pretty much not knocks the guys out, but pretty much disarms them. Green Hornet then comes out, and this is perhaps my favorite conversation of the whole episode. This is one that has always stuck with me. Basically, Burt turns to the Green Hornet and says, I thought you were wounded, and he turns back and says, I thought you were an honest cop. Basically, Burt tries to, be dumb and says, I don't know what you're talking about. And the Green Hornet basically just says this. Basically says, I'll make it simple for you. You guys have been jumping burglary calls and filling your pockets. And when, the cop says you can't prove that, he says, maybe I can. One missing button was found at the scene of last night's robbery. Unless an anonymous lead was sent to the district attorney, it's like, but, they still say he doesn't mean a thing. Well, Burt says that, and Dixon is very much worried. Green Hornet said, maybe not, but are you willing to roll the dice? What do you want from us? Stop your operation until, they can figure out the Green Hornet's not involved. So I kind of like this confrontation a bit. And I like how Burt is really standing his ground, while Dixon is really terrified. It kind of plays with that usual dynamic, with one partner being the more strong and assertive, while the other one's more weak-minded and almost a victim of being bullied. But basically, the Green Hornet gives them an ultimatum. Stop this operation until someone figures out the Green Hornet's not involved. And Burt says, and if we don't? And basically, I just like how the Green Hornet just points and goes, just try me. And they just get in the car, drive off, and basically humiliate the cops. Especially Burt, who felt his pride and ego. I just love this conversation. I love the confrontation. It just felt so authentic. And they hope that this will be enough to not have them go after, Mike, as they clearly know. And just as that's happening, Mike's at the warehouse and he's having all the furs be, at least seen. He hides up in a vantage point, but tips off the alarm to get the callers. And just as the Green Hornet was hoping, they, won't go for the trap that Mike's been obviously setting up, they go for it. But however, Bert does agree with Dixon, considering the heat, and finally Dixon kind of getting through to Bert. He agrees, this would be the last time. It will be our biggest score, but it will be the last time that they ever do something like this. They quickly get there, hop out of the police car, and end up going into the building where they start to get the furs. However, Mike ends up taking a picture, but this ultimately blows his cover, and as a result, he asks Dixon to go outside, to call for backup, while Bert says, basically implying he's going to get the suspect, destroy the picture, and definitely imply he's going to kill Mike. By this point, the Green Hornet and Kato finally arrive. Even though Green Hornet's heavily wounded, he can't take the risk and needs to go inside to save Mike Axford. And basically ask Kato, to wait outside. Just as the Green Hornet enters in, Dixon is making his way outside, and Kato pretty much ends up subduing him and knocking him out. Again, Bruce Lee was perfect casting choice for the role of Kato, and again has stood the test of time, the image of what you would expect from Kato. The Green Hornet makes his way in, and whilst he's struggling to keep up, mostly because of his arm, he does end up saving Mike Axford's life and, knocking out Bert. However, Mike, does end up punching him, and he ends up falling, but he managed to grab rope at the last minute, but is heavily injured. Kato manages to come in and, quickly save him, and they quickly run out, just as Mike picks up Bert's gun and starts firing at him. But he feels defeated because he failed, to at least wound him. The Green Hornet and Kato quickly get in the car and drive off, just as the other police car that was, the honest one, ends up turning up, and essentially implies that, they arrested Dixon and Bert. We end the episode with Mike, even though he, can't believe that, crooked cops were behind this, he was still upset that he came this close to getting the Green Hornet, but failed. Britt Reed just basically tells him, just stop right there. You report crime. Don't be doing a thing like this again. We end with a nice little funny moment, and we end the episode there. Okay, what I absolutely love in this episode is the position the Green Hornet, and Britt Reed are put here. He's he's shot, he's wounded, he can't go to a hospital, and he doesn't really have the resources like his own private doctor, like to get the bullet out. So I like the little scenario they did to get the bullet out, but also help, I think, cement the Green Hornet's reputation as a notorious criminal and racketeer. I also like how Mike Axford and Frank Scanlon are roped into the story. Again, would like to see more of Kato, but I do appreciate, he did try to get the bullet out and wasn't working. So I do appreciate that. Casey really falls into the background in this episode and is really nothing more than just window dressing, unfortunately. Something I'm really noticing an occurring kind of role for her in more episodes. Like, she doesn't really contribute much to the stories, at least having an actual voice or a role, and is mostly, again, window dressing, which is a real shame that that's the case. But I really love the scenario of what our heroes are being put in, and I also think it complements well with our unique villains for these episodes. The villains for this episode are two crooked cops. One is the more older beat cop of Bert Clark, portrayed by Bert Freed, and then the younger one, Officer Dixon, portrayed by Brian Avery. Now, what I like about this is, first off, we've already had in the series a bunch of racketeering gangsters. Sometimes we go against crooked businessmen, or sometimes criminals that, are just more colorful, but not crooked cops. Not even the Batman 66 show did Batman go up against crooked cops. And I also like how these two have a different dynamic. Bert is clearly, again, in it for the greed to abuse his power to make money. And he's, abusing, Dixon to essentially tag along. And be a part of this. Something he clearly doesn't want to do. Again, I just love the dynamic and each actor pulls off. It kind of be considered to stereotype, but I like to consider that considering what the time period was, I don't think in TV shows you had bent or crooked cops. You may have something that would be more parody of those old school noir detectives, but I wouldn't say that, actual where the bad guys were actually cops. Something that was, I think, unheard of. I also think if the series did come back for a second season, I think these guys should have just been a one and done, never come back. I also think it was a missed opportunity for Dixon not to stand up to Bert, because I felt that was like a missed opportunity, because like Bert's been bullying him, bullying him, bullying him. It would have been just great for him to finally stand up, to Bert and take responsibility and essentially take him down. I felt there was a missed opportunity there. That's just my personal opinion. But despite me thinking that, these two are great in the roles they are playing. It's very outstanding. Bad bet on a 459 Silent is for me, I think, a very memorable episode in the series. Probably would make a top 5 list. Mostly what I think is memorable about it is the Green Hornet getting shot in the shoulder, going to a hospital and still have to find a way to get the bullet out of him. It is something that will be carried over to the Seth Rogen film and again proves it's just memorable. Other than that, this episode is still pretty good too, with unique things that have gone for it that really makes me enjoy it. The idea of, again, the villains being bank cops, the interesting racket they're doing, been jumping burglary calls, and stealing what loot that was left behind, with most of it still to be blamed on the actual robbers. Again, I think this is perhaps the best use of the Green Hornet being involved, with his criminal notoriety here. Another thing I appreciate about it is they went with this route to get him wounded. I don't think in the Batman 6, actually in the Batman 66 show, they didn't have Batman get in a position like this. I appreciate it that they went with that route. It makes this episode more unique and more fresh and interesting in my opinion. Overall, Bad Bet on a 459 Silent is a really great episode. And there we have it. That was a bad bet on a 459 Silent. A really great episode. That was my opinion of it. Join us next time as we review another episode in the Green Hornet 66 review. Until next time, this has been the Steven Hour, and so long for now.